Hey folks, welcome to another module that I want to give you some description, some brief summary of the events and circumstances and topic areas that we'll be discussing at various times, including now, briefly, and in more detail at other times in the future. One of the things that I want to cover as part of the training, in addition to learning the airplane, the operation of the airplane, is things like what you see right here. This being a transition as you're starting to get some visibility during a low visibility approach. And there really has to be an effort to transition from some of the opaque cues during an instrument approach. This transition requires some real organized conditions of mind and of process with your flying skills. One of the things I want to point out, and we'll cover a number of different areas that have to do with these low visibility approaches, but what I want you to notice here, and I'll preface it with this, some of the more interesting yahoos in flying, and they occur in training, but it's also something that really occurs in the real world. And there is a systematic and organized way that you ought to make this transition from instrument conditions to visual conditions. And right here in this depiction, I want you to notice that with this co-pilot here, where's his eyes? They're outside. Now, this is just a one moment, one little snap moment in time where we're seeing this depiction. But if this kind of condition is going on from here on into landing, and he's the flying pilot, there can be some interesting things that can happen. There needs to be a systematic way that you transition if you're the flying pilot, and even as the monitoring pilot. And we're going to discuss some of those techniques and some of those circumstances. And it is important. To me, it's one of the more critical things about safety of flight in this profession, these low visibility approaches to landing. Now, some of the other things that we're going to cover is, well, let me just continue with this, okay? What you're seeing here, gang, is a situation of where you have approach lights that are visible to you, but not necessarily the landing environment. And we're starting to pick up the runway, but we're going to talk about some of the aspects of being able to continue approaches with just approach lights and not the runway environment in sight. We'll cover all those details. They're important to understand, especially in the circumstances of making some of these approaches, because everything that happens down in this area right here happens very quickly, which need good cross-checks and scans of instrumentation, of outside, inside, and making some quick decisions. Now, another thing I want to point out with this particular slide is that this is an auto land approach. We see the autopilot is on. We see that we have a flare arm, and many of the things that occur here that require crew coordination we're going to talk about. Airlines have procedures for down in this area, and they need to be perfectly, hear me say this, perfectly understood in these critical time periods, and we're going to cover some of those details. Now, here as we continue further with this approach, and this isn't a real low visibility approach, but what you now have is the entire runway environment in sight here. So at this point, when you're 300 feet above the ground, you have an opportunity, because you have some VASIs, to be more visual than instrument. But one of the things I'm going to cover is making this transition from instrument to visual, and making that transition gradually and safely.